Hello and welcome to Farm Business Bites. My name's Neil Butler. Today we're going to discuss farm safety with Denise McLellan, who operates a small business specialising in helping farmers with the people side of farming. Denise has worked in farming and agriculture for over 25 years. She's worked in the grains industry in both government and private sectors in agronomy, growers extension services and industry development. Working alongside scientists, researchers and much of the supply chain means Denise has a strong understanding of the grains industry, farming and agriculture. Denise and her husband are first-generation farmers, having established a farm business in the Wimmera region of Victoria with the lease of a local farm. These days, they farm grains and sheep across multiple regions in Victoria. Denise is passionate about sharing stories of farm life and the joys of living in the country, with the aim of helping people understand where their food and fibre comes from. She's a strong supporter of encouraging the next generation in choosing farming and agriculture as a rewarding career and fantastic lifestyle option. In her spare time, Denise enjoys poking around in the garden, loves hanging with her dogs and horses, and keeps fit with the odd running event. Denise holds a Bachelor of Agricultural Science, a Master of Business Administration, and is a graduate of both the Australian Rural Leadership Program and the Australian Institute of Company Directors. G'day, Denise, and welcome to Farm Business Bites.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you. That's a long introduction, isn't it?
That was a mouthful.
And I even managed to stumble over it, but that's okay. We do that every now and again. So let's kick off with our conversation with some farm safety stats. What's going on farms at the moment?
Well, the stats are terrible, Neil. It's basically these Australian farms employ, I think, 2% of the workforce in Australia, but account for over 20% of the deaths. So it's just horrendous statistics. And that's what's going on.
And that's obviously around fatalities, but obviously there are other things from near misses, presumably, through to fatalities. And I'm assuming that there are farmers are overrepresented in that as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So really there are fatalities, there are claims for injury, and then there are near misses. It's a very dangerous industry, and it's undisputed how bad the stats are. And it's tricky because a lot of people have grown up in that environment and they have forgotten or don't realise how dangerous it really is.
So you've kind of answered it already a little bit, but let's go in a bit more in depth. Why are the stats so bad for farmers?
Oh, it's a number of reasons. It's got to do with long hours, so fatigue. So busy times of the year where people are working extremely long hours. It's got to do with who makes up the workforce. So fatalities can often be from people who are quite experienced in farming and potentially become complacent, or else they can often be from people who are new to that industry and they don't know all the ins and outs about it. So it's a mix of the people and the environment and the increasing pressures.
And I guess to an extent there would be some degree of unpredictability that farming and external work in its own right, suddenly a rainstorm turns up, for example.
Yeah. And I've talked a lot about that in my work with people, is that when the pressure's on, the environment can shift quite suddenly in terms of how you go about your work. The pressure can really increase, and the expectations from your boss can be that, sorry, you can't knock off today at 6. We need you to work longer hours. We're going to keep going for 3 days until, that rain stops us. Or there's lots of reasons why the pressure can come on, or the situation can change.
And I guess some of the work that farmers would do would be quite repetitive. My very minor experience on the land some time ago, I remember driving a tractor up and down a paddock to mow some grass. And I guess if you've been doing that all day, it becomes a bit repetitive and a bit hard to make interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. And you can be doing, for example, if you're a header driver and harvest goes for 6 weeks, you could be sitting in a cabin doing the same job for 12 hours a day for 6 weeks. And so, it does the enthusiasm or the focus that potentially that you might bring to the job in the first week can be quite different to what you bring to the job in week 5 or 6.
And I'm tipping also that, again, my experience is 25 years old. I'm assuming with some of the more comfortable agricultural equipment that people are driving, the temptation to pick up the phone and check a YouTube link or maybe even watch an episode of Farm Business Bites, a great thing to do, but not while you're driving a header.
Yes, and it's funny you should mention that, because I was dealing with a young person at Harvest, and there had been an incident with clipping the edge of the header front, and the first question I said was, "Were you on your phone?" And then I said, because when you speak to your boss, the first question they're going to ask you is, "Were you on your phone?" And yeah, it's a huge temptation, and it's very distracting, and even the best of people can get distracted by their phone at work these days.
Absolutely. Well, not the ideal place to do it, I wouldn't have thought, on a farm. So let's think about the obligations of the farm business. I think first and foremost, let's think a bit about the fact that most people don't, most people who aren't involved in agriculture probably don't even think of a farm as a business. They think of it as a farm.
Yeah.
Let's flesh out the concept of it being a small to medium-sized business.
Well, that's exactly right. I often say to people, imagine it's like a factory. Like you go, the factory, when you walk into a factory, you're in a workplace, and you've got to stand behind that line, or you've got to follow the rules on the wall. Like it's the same as that. It is a workplace, and yes, people often live, their house is just the fence over, but it is a workplace, and we need to take that seriously.
Yeah, I can remember talking to someone years ago and saying, how good is it to have a job as a farmer? And they say, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. Well, it probably is to an extent, but at the end of the day, it's still a job, isn't it? You're going to work to put in some labor, to get some reward at the end of the day, week, month, or year, hopefully. And, you've got to treat it as such.
Absolutely. Like there are lots of really good things about living on the land, and I'm quite passionate about that, as you said in your introduction about me. However, if you're the owner of that business, you've got a duty of care that everybody that walks onto your property, that comes onto your property, that is kept safe. So it's gone are the days that we could be quite casual and cruisy about these things. Like it's a really significant responsibility.
I guess the other thing that farmers tend to do is employ casual labour, whether that's helping pick fruit or whether it's coming in and shearing for a period of time. Even if those people are not employed by you as employees as a farmer, they're still certainly eligible for your absolute highest priority of safety.
That's exactly right, Neil. And something that people often forget about, if people come hunting on your property or shooting on your property, they're not an employee, they're not a casual, but if they come onto your property, like, you do have a duty of care to keep them safe. It's if you've got visitors like trucks delivering fertilizer or stock or things for your business, they need to be kept safe. Contractors, if someone's coming in and doing some routine work for a week for you on your property, like, it's those people as well. It's employees, it's casuals, it's visitors, it's hunters, it's fishermen, it's all kinds of people that come onto your property.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about obligations, and rumour reaches me that you've got 6 steps that you like to refer to when you're talking about the obligations of the farm business.
Yes, I do. Let me just look. I'm just looking through my notes. I always forget them. So there's 6 really key steps that you need to undertake to keep your people safe. And I'll just run through the list, Neil, and then we can flesh it out as we go. So the first one is communication, and it sounds obvious, but sometimes it's not. So, but communication is a critical one that you've got, that you need to have. The second one is emergency planning. And then third is induction of new employees. Fourth, hazard and risk management. The fifth one is training and competencies. And then the sixth dot point for safety on your farm is reporting injuries and near misses. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So let's flesh those out one by one.
Yeah.
First, which one do you want to do first?
Well, why don't we just start at the top, or could I jump in and talk about the culture of your business?
Sure, absolutely.
Can
It's
you do
your
that?
conversation. I'm just here to prompt you on your way. Let's
Well,
talk about that first.
sure. Well, it sounds really obvious, but people forget. Like if I'm looking for a job and I ring you and say, hey, I know you know this farmer down the road. What's he like? Would you work for them? You're going to say, yeah, he's a great bloke, or treats people well, or no, I don't want to work there. Culture is really important. How people view your business in terms of how you operate and how you treat your people is really important. And so I'm really passionate about, before people actually get stuck into safety, actually thinking about your culture and what you can do better. So if people are going to come and work for me, would they say, oh no, she works her people really long hours and you don't want to work for her because you'll never get a weekend off? Or they might talk about the culture. They're really nice. They have a barbecue on a Friday night. They treat their people well. They definitely work hard during the busy periods, but they, let people have time off during the quiet periods. We always celebrate birthdays. Like, culture is really critical. And we always know those businesses. We're always quite easy to talk about those businesses that, no, I wouldn't work for them. They're not good operators, or they don't look after their people. And you don't want to be in that category of employers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, culture's something that's really hard to define, isn't it? You can't, like, if we'll talk a bit about emergency planning, you could effectively say, in my mind, you got to do this, then this, then this, then this, and there's your emergency planning. But and we'll flesh that out more soon. But what's your culture? And I guess the way I'd like to look at it is to say, how would I want to work? How would it be for me if I was going to work for you, if that makes sense? So what are the things that ring your bells about going to work on a daily basis?
Yes, and they do say, on a Sunday night, what are your people thinking about going to work on Monday? Are they, I don't want to go to work tomorrow, or are they excited to be there? And so for me, culture is how we communicate, how we treat our people, and it's what we value. So I talk a lot about, especially in farming, there are busy periods that are hard and long hours, and it's tiring, and you do miss out on some things. So if you're expecting people to step up to the plate, then how can you show your appreciation and value for them at other times of the year? Because we can't get things done in 7.6 hours of a day. So it's important that your people feel valued.
And it's like my grandmother used to say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which I think translates is treat people like you want to be treated yourself.
Yeah. But like the tides have turned, especially with employees these days. Like, I think years ago, we could have gone with the mantra, you're so lucky to have a job, and bosses could have potentially been a bit too bossy. Whereas now that the employee market has changed, and people will walk away much more easily than they would have in the past, and that's fair enough. If you're getting treated poorly, you don't have to put up with that. But so how you treat your people now really does matter, and it influences your productivity. It influences employee retention, like people staying with you for longer, job satisfaction, and then that overarchingly leads to the profitability and success of your business. So it makes a lot of sense to have a good culture where people talk about you favorably.
Now, if I take it to a corporate environment and people talk about culture, they'll talk about whether or not there's a table tennis table in the cafeteria, and whether they can go home or have lunch up the street, or is there a cafe or a coffee machine. We talk a lot about those sorts of things, but I would have thought, and maybe it's the background that I've had in the oil industry as well, I would have thought that safety needs to sit very high on the list of things that influences your culture.
Absolutely. Because people these days will walk. They're not going to turn up for a job and suck it up for a month if they think it's not safe for them. So they will walk. And a lot of my work is that I do inductions of new people for farm businesses. And a lot of the people these days, if they've come from corporate or larger businesses, and we'll go through all the paperwork and the protocols, they'll be like, I'm used to this is what you have to do. Whereas and they have an expectation that of what is required regarding safety. Whereas some other people that have worked with the same person for years or have worked in smaller businesses, the first time I'll do an induction with them, they'll be quite surprised at that this is what happens, and no one's ever done this for me before. And I said, well, this is all about you understanding how we'll keep you safe in our business. And yeah, it's people know. A lot of people know.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things that come to my mind as you're talking about that is in a lot of situations, and I suspect in the case of the farm community, it's the same. Safety is often a lot of don't do this kind of statements. You know, don't speed, don't be on your phone while you're driving a track, whatever it is. But I think that sort of reactive, if you like, or negative approach to safety should be augmented by things like, you know, where you can get a good night's sleep the day before. And, you know, a lot of do as well as not do.
Yes, correct. And so two things. I talk a lot about with farmers and their employees about how situations can change in terms of what level of autonomy that your boss will provide you. So during busy periods when the pressure's on, your boss might say, I need you to do this and I need it done now and you have to do it this way. But during other times of the year, he might say, these are the jobs that need to be done for the week. Take your pick and you just chip away through it. And the second thing I was going to say is my big statement is that this is how we do things around here. So I really want farmers or bosses or farm managers to take some pride in this is how we do things around here. And that's when people understand the culture of that on a previous farm I might have hooked up a trailer that way, but on this farm they want me to do it this way because that's the safer way. Well, this is how we do things around here. And yeah, it's really important to take ownership of how you would like things done in your business, but know when you need to be quite instructive and directive, and then when you can give people ownership to take jobs on themselves and increase their own self-worth and value in your business.
And I think the nice thing about that's the way we do things around here is that that's not the way we do things around here. Sometimes there'll be the requirement to pull that one out, but to me, if we can explain what people should be doing as distinct from what they shouldn't be doing. Yeah. Hey, we've been parents. We know how that works with small children. And at the end of the day, most grown-ups are just small children who've grown up. So, I think it's a really important component of it. The other thing that jumped out at me when you were talking about this, and we'll get back to those 6 points in a moment because I think they're really important, and I think will sort of be helpful for what I'm about to say. And that is, I think it's really easy when you jump in a header. There are some things that you don't do, or you do because you know that a header running over your foot's not a really good thing. But it's some of the other things that are less obvious where some of those near misses and fatalities and everything in between happen because, everyone jokes about in a corporate environment, oh, yeah, we need to have a safety culture. We don't want a paper cut. But some of these things are quite, trivial on the surface, but have some real underlying safety cultural components.
Absolutely. And that goes back to making assumptions about what people do and don't know. And we can't assume that people know that one little thing that you need to do so you don't get run over because, we don't know what people's backgrounds is or are. And something that I always talk about is that most people that come onto your farm will have a car license. So we know they know how to drive a car. So it's the same as a lot of people know how to drive a header, but the culture of this is how we do things around here is that do you know how to drive the header safely? This is how we drive a header safely. So a lot of people know how to operate things, but whether they know how to do it safely the way you'd like it done is a second. That's the key point. And in all honesty, I'm dobbing on my son here. I've got my own chainsaw and I was using it the other day and I can get it started and I can cut things. And he said to me, Mum, that's not how you use a chainsaw. And that's the point. I know how to operate it, but I wasn't using it safely. And that's the difference. Lots of people can do stuff, they can operate things, but we need them to do it safely in our workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's going to be a lot of what we've just talked about mentioned in those 6 steps. Let's choose one of the 6 steps and let's talk it through.
Okay, so I'm just gonna flick through. Oh, where is it? Oh, actually, we'll go to emergency planning because something that I find is that farm businesses find it hard to get started on safety. It just seems so overwhelming that they do nothing. And so I always say, if you don't know where to start with emergency planning. And what I mean by that is that you need to have a plan for your farm. So if something goes wrong, you need to have a plan, and your people who are there need to know where it is and what to do. And so it's really like the common emergencies on farm are fire, medical. They could be a medical episode, or it could be chemical. And you need a plan. You need to have detail in it, and everyone needs to know where to find it. So if you haven't done anything with safety on your farm, my number one thing would be to Google farm emergency information sheet. There's a lot of them. I use one from Farm Safe Australia, but it basically just has all the key phone numbers of people within your business and then outside of your business, and it will have things like where to what do you call it, evacuate to, like we meet in the farmyard, or first aid kits are located on this farm in every vehicle. You'll find one in the workshop. A lot of farms now have their own defib. It gives you all those basics of things that you need in an emergency. So if you don't have any other safety protocols, but at least you have that, I think that's the key start.
Well, you take one of the defibs, for example, and they're worth thousands of dollars, absolutely useless if no one knows where they are. Clearly.
No, I know. And
the poor bloke who does know where it is the one having the heart attack. Not helpful.
Yes, and this is the thing, like farms, especially grain farms in particular, have a lot of cabins, like a lot of vehicles and a lot of plant with cabins, and you really should have an emergency kit in every cabin. And it might only be a snake bite kit. And I know the overlay if you need to buy 20 or 30 first aid kits would not be uncommon for a lot of farms. They would need that many. It is an initial outlay, but you can't underestimate the importance of that, and the smallness of the cost of having them on hand when you need them if there is an emergency. So, it is first aid kits. It's having firefighting equipment, and you should be checking your firefighting equipment every year that it's up to date and working. Having spill kits for chemicals, and really obvious stuff. An obvious thing is food and water. So, for example, a lot of farm utes or farm vehicles will have a water tank underneath. And when I say food, it's things like if you've got people working for you and it could be a winter thing or it could be a summer thing, but if you need to say to them, I need you to pack enough food to last the whole day. And it sounds like teaching people to suck eggs, but sometimes you experience people that turn up to work with, it hasn't been uncommon. I've had people have turned up to work with like a can of Red Bull and a box of barbecue shapes, and that's not going to last the day, mate. Like, you actually need to bring enough food for the whole day.
Yeah. And I think the thing to remember too is we're talking to farmers predominantly here, and it's not as though you can walk to the vending machine at the other end of the floor or nick over the road to the hamburger shop and buy yourself something to eat. You are going to be isolated often by yourself.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like, some farms are close to town, or you might be delivering grain and going past a roadhouse, but a lot of them aren't. And so you need to bring enough water for the day, which is at least 2 liters, and you need to bring your food for the entire day. And you need to be very clear with your people about during busy periods. Like, a lot of farmers will bring dinner to the paddock if you're working in the evenings, but you need to make it very clear so there's no room for error, that someone turns up with nothing and doesn't have any food. And that kind of leads on to knowing the specific needs of your people. And this goes back to emergency planning. So, for example, if you have a diabetic, and have you got I don't know, red frogs in the glove box of every vehicle, or do you know that they have supplies that they need if they have a low or whatever in their lunchbox? Emergency planning is knowing the specific needs of your people. So if you've got an asthmatic, what do you have there to cater for that? Or so emergency planning is for everyone knowing that when the situation arises, that they know what to do, where to go, and how to access things. It's really important. And
and have your appropriate we'll come to communication in a moment, but communication devices, whether that's a mobile phone where you're in range, or a satellite phone if necessary, or a two-way or something like that, that when the emergency occurs, you can at least tell someone.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm leading on to next. So there's always a lot of talk about mobile phones and how they're the devil. But on the other hand, a lot of the businesses that I work with, the rule is that you always have your phone on you. So, for example, if you're driving a truck and you get out of the truck to load and you break your leg, but your phone's in the truck, then that's no good. So you've got to keep you. So a safety thing is encouraging people to keep your phone on you. You need it with you at all times. And a lot of farms, if they don't have service, they will have a UHF. But it's really important to have your phone on you. And something that have you heard of the Emergency Plus app?
I haven't heard that particular app, and I know there's some certainly on phones that are available. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a Victorian government thing or not, but it's basically it's because one of the big things with being in rural and or remote Australia is that if you do ring 000 and they say, "Well, what's your location?" and you could have just arrived on this farm a week ago, and we all know farmers don't name their paddocks
Mm.
like things that make sense, and you're like, "Where the heck am I? How do I explain where I am?" The Emergency Plus app is it's it's based on the system of what three words. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it again, but please explain
Well,
it.
I'll explain it to you. So instead of saying to the emergency operator, my longitude and my latitude is, and reel out that long list of numbers, the what three words is basically the world is divided up into, I think it's 5 meter square grids, and
Mhm.
every grid has a unique a word to identify it. So for example, if I looked up on Emergency Plus app now for my location, it might say. So you say to the operator, my what three words location is apples, couch, and banana peel. Or
Barking dog.
yeah, yeah,
Because we
yeah,
can hear one barking in the background,
yeah.
which is
Sorry.
makes it all very authentic.
Yeah, so it takes when you're panicking and you're in an emergency, you're trying to reel off your latitude and longitude, you just say my what three words are, and then
Mm.
that pinpoints your location. And that's a really easy, obvious thing that every farmer should have all their people have on their phone. Get the Emergency Plus app on your phone.
And we should just put a footnote to what you were saying. Very, very good advice. Except if you're driving a fuel truck and you're delivering fuel to a service station, please don't have your mobile phone on you. That's just the oil industry in me coming out. The other thing that you can also do, about 18 months ago, I twisted my ankle in the backyard of my home here, fell over a piece of grass from what I can see, and hit the ground, and did some damage to my ankle. But I noticed on my Apple Watch, or other brands, if so that we don't make
Yeah,
everyone think we have to buy an Apple Watch. I looked at it and it said, because it was throbbing on your arm, and I looked at it and it said, "It looks like you've had a fall. Would you like us to call emergency services for you?" And I was more embarrassed than anything else, but so I said, "No, thank you, it's okay." But in the event that you
yeah,
are wearing something like that and you do fall, and one of the obvious classic falls is people who forget about the 3 points of contact with their truck when they're getting out of it, and they fall off and hit the ground, and so
yeah,
there's a million reasons why you should do it, but it's very sound advice, I would have thought.
yeah.
Let's move on then. We've touched on communication, so let's go down that path again. We'll come back to induction of new employees, but let's roll into the communication conversation, because it's a really important one, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. It's absolutely critical, and it doesn't need to be hard. And I'm just going to read out for you a quote, which is really poignant to safety. People don't do what we expect; they do what we accept. So if you have a problem on your farm, you either employed it, you created it, or you allowed it.
Mm.
And I think that's a really critical statement. And that all comes back to communication, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I do a little bit of work around engagement and communication in my real job. And I think one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm talking about engagement is communication tends to be one way. And I always say that if you send out an email, you might as well run down to the fence and throw a whole lot of brochures over the fence and hope someone picks one up and reads it. Whereas if you are engaging with people, and the obvious example is what they like to call a toolbox session, or
Yeah,
a daily kick-off or whatever, but it really needs to be two-way communication. I would have thought that the farmer or whoever's running the show, yes,
yeah,
present the messages they want to present, But these, you got two of these and only one of these. Maybe listening is more important than talking quite often. And I think in that situation, the farmers can pick things up from their people.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And any good boss wants feedback and wants two-way communication from their people. And I always talk about that a lot in inductions. Like sometimes your boss might say, I need this done this way. This is the only way. But other times they'll want your feedback. Or if you could think of a way we can do this better, please do. And leading on to safety, like communication plus your good culture, which we talked about, that's what really creates your people being engaged in a safety culture on your farm. And you want to create that environment, which is from communication and culture, where people feel comfortable to say, I've just reversed into that thing and dinged the tractor, or I nearly cut my finger off. Or we want people to feel open and encouraged to say, yeah, what's happened and what's gone wrong, or I don't feel good about doing this. And that comes back to culture, because if you can tell people as often as you want, if anything's wrong, just speak to me. But if you haven't created that culture where they feel comfortable, they're not going to. Of course, they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I'm picking up as you're talking is that this is not only about telling people when things go bad.
Yes.
It's also communicating things we did that were good. And it sounds a little bit, but celebrate the wins, celebrate the things that went well. We said once that if you are backing the header, you should be looking in the mirror every 3 seconds or whatever. And someone did, and they saw a bike in the paddock behind them or whatever. Reinforce behaviours that people have done along the lines of the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that whole, there's a time for a carrot and stick. There's a time for reprimand. I don't know if that's the word, but there's also a time for, wow, you did a great job. You've got to get that balance. You definitely do. You definitely have to. It's not one and it's not the other. And if you're a really nice boss and you're always telling people they're doing a great job when they're not, well, that doesn't help either. Like you need to be
absolutely
open and realistic. People actually want to know how they're going, and they want to be pulled up. And so going back to that initial quote I said about people do what we accept and not expect. If you see someone, a lot of farmers feel sometimes if someone's new come along and they're doing something not quite right, they don't want to be picky and pull them up, but it's your business. Be picky. Like, choose what you're going to. Don't be nitpicky about the silly things that don't matter, but it's your business. If something's not quite right, nip it in the bud at the start. Don't let it become a new habit. Yeah. It's not.
Well, that sounds like an ideal segue into the induction of new employees. You've got someone walking through the front gate to come and help you for 6 months on a piece of work you're doing on your farm. They could be straight out of high school on a gap year, or they could be 65, semi-retired, and just looking for a bit of cash. I would have thought that both of those groups need a different kind of induction, but an induction nonetheless. And everything in between.
Yes, and absolutely, you can't get away from the induction. So whether it's and I'm making stereotyping kind of judgments here, whether it's a young, inexperienced backpacker fresh off the plane, or someone that's worked on farms forever, they still need an induction, without a doubt. They need to know the point of the induction is that at the end of that meeting, that person will go away saying, wow, I have a really good understanding of this business and how they operate. I know what they will do for me, and I have a very clear idea of their expectations of me, what I'll do and how I'll operate. And it doesn't matter if you've worked on farms before, there are still things that you need to go through. And that includes just a general introduction about the farm business, like who's who in the zoo. Like a lot of farms, you've got the team on the ground, but behind the scenes, and I'm stereotyping here, but there could be the grandparents or the parents, or there could be a wife and kids, there could be extended family, and there's often a lot of people in the team of the farm that you don't realize, and they're all just as critical. You need to talk about the position and discuss the position. You should have a position description. It saves a lot of hassle down the track. Like if you've got a very specific position description, like I'm employing you as a a spray operator, and then you've got that person doing sheet work, they could say to you, well, hang on, you didn't say I was doing sheet work. You said I was employed. So you've got to be clear about what their role is and what they'll be doing. You do actually have to go through employment paperwork these days. We're not doing the old handshake, Neil. She'll be right. I'll pay you this and we'll shake on it. Like, you actually do need to employ them properly, which means an employment contract. And then you do need to go through some safety paperwork, such as this is what we do in an emergency. This is who are your emergency contact? Who is your emergency contact? And I really push that. It sounds so obvious. And then once you've got that person's emergency contact, we don't want that on a piece of paper in your filing cabinet. You need to put it in the phone of all your key people on your farm, because there'd be nothing worse than if something went wrong and you couldn't contact that person's emergency contact. You need to go through some safety policies of these are our rules for phone use. These are our rules for how we operate our machinery. This is our rules for how we handle our animals. Like, we don't like in terms of animal welfare. These are our rules for fatigue. How many hours you'll work. Like, it's you were talking about your rules for alcohol and drug use, because drugs is fairly black and white, but there are different farms definitely have different cultures in terms of alcohol consumption. So some farms will say, no, we have zero alcohol on site. Others will say we stop on a Tuesday for 2 beers, and that's it. I always say, like, a lot of businesses have the fridge in the workshop. What are the rules for the workshop fridge? Is it a free for all, or like is it when the boss says you can get a beer? And as the boss, you need to be very conscious of the fact that you need to get your employees home safely. So it's all good for them to have 5 beers, but then you don't want to have them drive home like that. So a lot of businesses have a 2 beer policy, but you need to make that clear, because
and from what I'm hearing you talk about, there's almost 2 parts to what you're talking about here. Part of it's kind of the law, you need to do these things. But then, to go back to a phrase you've used 2 or 3 times already, it's the way we do things around here.
Yeah.
And both are equally important.
Yeah, so people will come to your farm with not baggage, but they could have been working for a previous farmer that you sat on the beer with a 6-pack, and that was acceptable, and they'll just carry that on as the new habit. And if there are other younger employees around them, they might then think that that's the new norm, or people don't know what they don't know, and young people often are scared to ask. So something that I really do encourage is, when you do employ young people, you can say to them 1,000 times, look, if you're not sure, just ask. If you're not sure, just ask. But then sometimes they won't. And so as a boss, you'll say, okay, today I'll need you to do X, Y, Z. And they'll say, yep. And then you'll walk away, the boss will walk away, and then they'll turn to the person next to them and say, I didn't understand any of that. And so that's creating that culture when you have someone new starting your business, that you encourage your entire team to care about that person and welcome that person, because the boss will eventually find out what's happening or not happening, but the people who are working alongside will find out much quicker and be able to help a potential situation not escalate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think as well, people go, I haven't got time to be inducting people. But at the end of the day, it's that whole stitch in time saves 9 thing, isn't it? Tell people what you expect of them at the start. Some of those things that I say are legal. For example, there's a few. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 farmers watching this going, yeah, right, it's all right for you guys. You're sitting in his corporate office. But things like if you do employ them on a handshake, there's a fair chance you won't be covered for workers' compensation or other insurances. So you're protecting yourself by investing some time at the start. And in fact, if you're, as a farmer, we're all really good at good things and not so good at other things. Maybe if you're no good at it, I think there's someone I know who does that kind of induction work, and that's not an ad. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, there are ways to do things. You probably, as a farmer, you don't sit down and do your financial planning or your tax. You go and talk to an accountant. Get people to help if you don't, because it's that important. And it might cost a few bucks.
And it's all fine until it's not, essentially. And this is when you do need that. And I can remember something that has always really stuck in my mind is I spoke to a farmer once who his employee did have an accident and was injured quite poorly. And he said to me, Denise, for a while there, I wasn't sure if my children were going to inherit the farm or my workers' children. In other words, how had he done the right thing, and was he going to be not prosecuted? Yeah, was he going to be paying for not meeting his obligations? And when you hear it like that, it really, really sticks. And it's two things. You're doing this because you don't want to wake up the rest of your life knowing that someone didn't get home from your workplace. Like it is, I always say it's home safe every day. Like we don't want that to happen in our workplace. It would be the worst thing ever. And two, it is about being a responsible business owner and meeting your obligations. Yeah.
I think if we wind the clock back 30, 40, 50 years ago, I don't know that farmers were as conscious of the fact that they are small business operators as much as they are now. I think we've come a long way, and hats off to governments and other organisations who have said, no, actually, you know what, you really do need to invest some time and money into doing this, which leads nicely into the fourth point on the list. And I know I'm doing them out of order with the order that you just suggested.
Right.
But I think it leads nicely into training and the importance of training.
Yes. So I read a quote somewhere, and I'm probably going to get it wrong now. It said something like, train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. When you first employ someone, you need to say to them, where are you at? You need to find out their competencies, and you can't just it used to happen that it'd be the middle of harvest, you go into town and you pick up a backpacker off the bus, and then 3 hours later you'd have them driving the header. We can't do that anymore. And if you have an incident on your farm and WorkSafe comes out, they, amongst other things, one of the key things they will ask is, was that person trained to operate that bit of equipment? And a lot of a lot of farm businesses, family farm businesses say, oh, this training thing, they get so worked up about it because how do I train them? Whereas with corporate farms, it's very easy for them to have a day where they get their 20 employees from all their different locations and bring them together and say, this is how we're going to drive headers. But you can actually do it quite simply on your own farm business. And training isn't necessarily, sometimes it might be about, this is how we drive a car or this is how we operate a header. But what they really want to know is that you've trained them to operate it safely. So what I always say to someone is, it's really quite easy. If you're teaching someone to drive the header, you will drive the header and you'll have that person sitting in the seat next to you. And then after a period of time, you'll swap over and then you'll watch them and you'll correct them. And then when you're feeling comfortable, then you'll hop off and let that person do a few runs. So, and that is legitimate training. You can say, yes, I did train that person, but the key things that you do need to have when you are training someone with any bit of equipment on your farm is, so they need to know how to operate it. They need to know how to do all the pre-service checks. And then the third thing they need to do is, how do I shut this down in a hurry if there's an incident? And that's training. So I can say, no, I didn't send my person to header school. I didn't, but no, I trained them. And then you have to get them to sign off. So when you start on a new farm, you're a new business, you're not really meant to operate anything until you've been signed off as trained. And that's your confidence that I know that person knows how I want things done and they know what to do in an emergency.
And I guess if I was to walk up the driveway of a farm saying, I'm an itinerant, I'm looking for some work for a few months, and he looks at me and says, gee, you've been around the block a few times, mate. I'm happy to throw you the keys of the ute, off you go. You can't just make an assumption that people know what they're doing either. It's almost you need almost a curriculum that's a school teacher word, isn't it? You need a curriculum that says every person who works on this farm will do A, B, C, and D training. And if they're going to be driving equipment, they'll do E, And if they're going to be doing stuff in the office, they'll do F, whatever it is. But you've got to have a statement, don't you, to work towards?
Yeah, and that example of learning how to drive a header, it's not overly hard. And if you had someone that had driven headers before, well, you would probably just get in the header with them straight away and get them to drive and sit with them and just see if they're doing things how you like them done. Like that's how you would you would do it, but you would still go through, this is how we shut things down in a hurry, and go through those pre-safety checks, that kind of stuff. And then you can confidently say to the WorkSafe person, yes, I've spent that time with that person.
Yep.
They are trained and able to operate the header.
And it comes back to the training, a couple of the other things we've talked about, but record keeping is pretty important, I would have thought, when it comes to training.
Yes, it is. And so I'm really trying to encourage, I think back in the day, safety was all about having a big fat folder with policies, and that just stayed on the shelf and got dusty and was irrelevant. So I'm trying to encourage people to, we don't need to be overzealous with all these reams of long policies that no one ever reads, but we definitely do need some documentation and record keeping. So you do need the documentation to say that you've done an induction. You do need documentation to say that you've signed people off on trained to operate equipment. And it's just a simple list of all your equipment that you use, and then you tick the box and you both sign and date it. There are some things that you do need records of. If someone's hurt themselves on your farm, you do need to document that. If you've got a cut and you just need a band-aid on your finger, you're not going to do that. But if someone's cut themselves with an angle grinder and they need stitches, you do need to document that. It shows that you care, that you're following protocols, and that when the time arises, like if something did happen on your farm later on, and that you could actually, having those incident reports about the stitches in the finger shows that you do have a culture of following, taking safety seriously. It's evidence that helps you be a good business and show that you're doing the right thing.
And I'm looking at you, Mr. or Ms. Farmer, the person in charge. You need to do training as well. Don't just think, oh, look, I know it all. Ongoing training. It might well be that you learned to drive a tractor in 1972, but technology's moved forward a little bit. So don't just think it's about your team that needs training. It's about you as well.
Absolutely. And there are lots of workshops for things, so you can outsource it. Like some things you can completely outsource. There are header driving schools, there are chainsaw courses, there are forklift courses. Like you don't have to. Yeah, absolutely. You can get stale and be definitely doing things the wrong way. And I find in farming these days, a lot of people who aren't involved in farming and agriculture don't realize how high tech it is. It's very tech. It's very tech heavy, and so you do need to stay up to date with how things are done and so you're on top of it, because things can change quite quickly.
You wouldn't be all that thrilled if you found out that the doctor you've been seeing learned how to do heart surgery in 1981 and hadn't been back for a refresher in the meantime. I wouldn't have thought. Now, we talked a little bit about record keeping. That leads nicely into number 5 on our list, and that's the actual reporting of injuries and near misses. It doesn't really matter. Do we really need to record those, Denise? We'll remember them, won't they? If they're significant enough, we'll remember them.
That's exactly right. And I did touch on that a little bit. But yes, so for minor stuff, you're not going to worry. But for stuff like, imagine if you're the business owner, and then 3 days later your employee is called in sick, and then 3 days later you actually learn that they're in the hospital and they did cut their finger and it's become an infection. It's got quite serious. Like that goes back to communication and creating that culture where around here, if something happens to you, I need to know straight away. Like obviously, or within 3 hours or 5 hours, it depends. And you do need to keep records of that. And so when a WorkSafe person comes in, you can say, look, we are on top of this. We talk to our people. We encourage them to provide us with feedback of how we can do things better. And when things happen, we do keep records. And if it needs to be escalated to WorkSafe or whoever, then you've got all that documentation there ready to go.
Yes, it was tongue-in-cheek, folks, that when I said we don't need to record them. I think, though, the other thing is too, and if someone gets hit by a piece of machinery or they break a leg or whatever, of course we're going to record that. I think the other cultural thing, and again, coming with a background in the oil industry, even the near miss is important to record, isn't it?
It's critical. The near miss is the one that gets me the most. So I say to people, when you had that moment when you went, whew, that was close, or you get the funny feeling in your tummy, oh my gosh, that nearly could have been bad, but it wasn't. Whew, that was lucky. We want to know about that. Please tell us, because that means that we need to change something with how we're doing it, or we haven't given you the skills that you need to do that. We need to change something in our system to make sure that that potential disaster does not happen. Like that's a big red flag, and it's the perfect opportunity for a business to change how they do things before something bad does happen.
A
Yeah.
good example of that, and again, I keep going back to my corporate experience, but I was working in an office where we had, the kitchen was kind of in a little alcove, but to walk out of the kitchen, you came out into effectively passing traffic as people were walking around the building. And of course, most people walk with their cup of coffee in front of them. And we realized, thankfully, before anyone got hurt, that people were coming out with their cup of coffee. People didn't see them. Bang, they would walk in. So they end up taking out a cupboard and replacing it with a fish tank at exactly the height
Oh,
that
yeah.
the cup of coffee was there. So that you could actually, as you were walking along, you could see this hand appearing. Never happened that it was an issue, but there were so many near misses, it became
Yeah.
systemic. And we're going, we really should do something about that. So on a farm, it might be that people walk around the corner of the shed and really go close to hitting someone who's walking around the other corner of the shed. Maybe you
Yeah.
need a mirror on the corner.
That's right. And a near miss is your opportunity, like to stop your business being shut down for 2 days or a week. Like if someone has an accident or an incident, you don't know how big the flow-on effects are. Like especially when those busy periods and you've got things to be done, it's so much better to stop and fix that situation while it's minor. Rather than let it blow up and potentially you've got a person out of work for 6 weeks, or you can't use that equipment during a peak period because it's broken. It's that thing that saves potential disaster on a number of fronts, not just economic. It's a whole lot of things. It's really critical.
So the last one of the 6 that we haven't talked about yet is hazard and risk management. It kind of ties in a bit with the near misses, I would have thought.
Yeah, it does. And when it comes to farm safety, I actually find this is the one that farmers get stuck on because it's so hard and they don't know what to do and where to start. And basically what it is you can get templates online, hazard and risk templates for my farm. And what it is you go around your farm with a checklist and you look at everything from electrical cords to water sources to the safety of your equipment. It's actually inspecting everything that you need to run your business and checking off on you're checking off on the likelihood of something happening versus the outcome. So if something is likely to happen and it's going to result in death, you need to focus very heavily on what you can do to mitigate that. And this is quite a tricky exercise, but so you can go through a checklist and do it yourself. But the thing about the agricultural industry is that all of the industry bodies recognize how hard it is to do. And you can actually get, so for example, if you're in Victoria, you can get someone from the VFF to come out to your farm and do a hazard and risk assessment for you. Or you can ring the WorkSafe OH&S Essentials program and they will get someone to come out and walk around with you, because it can be quite overwhelming if you've never done it before. But they'll just go through everything from chainsaws to do you have guards around things, or have you got bollards around your fuel tanks. They'll actually go through and see what are the key things that are going to result in death and likelihood versus outcome, and they'll do it for you. But yeah, it is something that you do need to do for your business.
I think too, the other thing is that by having someone else involved and helping you, how many times have you on your farm, Denise, driven up your driveway? 100 times, 200 times, 500 times, and you probably don't see something that's been there sitting, whereas the person who comes along and sees, they go, hang on, I saw this at another farm, and if that keeps going, you're going to have this happen. So it's not only the fact that you don't have time, the whole fresh eyes thing comes into it.
Yeah, completely. I couldn't agree more. Fresh eyes is the ticket. It makes sense. So it doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to be overwhelmed that I don't know how to do this. This is just another thing I have to do. I haven't got time. Just get someone in to do it for you. And that's the beauty of it. The industry gets it's a hard thing to do, and they really want farmers to do it, so they'll support you in doing it. So hazard and risk estimates are critical.
So you touched on it then. Farmers tell me they're busy all the time. I don't know. Yeah, of course they're busy all the time. And in fact, sometimes they're not busy. They're really busy. So it seems to me that if you're running a farm, whether it's a one-man band or, a corporate environment, there's plenty to do. This is obviously a really easy home run for you. Whereabouts do you rank safety in terms of getting things done? Is it sitting at the top of the list, somewhere on near the top of How important is this when you are so busy, particularly during busy times?
It's a no-brainer, Neil. It's number one. If you don't take safety seriously, I shouldn't say that. It's the worst outcome is the worst. You not only potentially will have someone that's died on your watch, but that's going to have big implications for your business. It's the worst. You have to take it seriously. You can never say something is more important. And I'm really passionate about encouraging, you can do things safely without losing efficiency. So farmers think it's going to stop them from doing things they want to do, the way they want to do them. It's going to slow things down. Well, no, it doesn't have to be. Yes, you do need to spend that hour or two inducting a new employee, but that means that that means, therefore, if you spend that time, then you'll be spending less time down the track. Like, there are some things that you can't get away with, and if you're playing Russian roulette, then eventually you might trip up. But safety has to be number one. We're talking about people's lives here. The stats don't lie.
I was at a presentation by one of the international leaders of a very large oil company many years ago, and he came out, and we used to always grumble a bit when these guys used to turn up because they were coming out to tell us how to do our job, that sort of stuff. And he got up and stopped in front of the group and said, "We have got 10 priorities for next year. I'm going to go through them for you. Number 1 to 5 is safety. Number 6 to 10 doesn't matter." And I thought that kind of sums it up pretty well. And again, when you're dealing in the oil industry, it's pretty obvious that it can be an unsafe environment. For people who are familiar with farming environments, who have grown up on the land, it's possibly not as obvious, but it's just as important, I would have thought.
It is. And that's what I'm really passionate about. Like, you can do it. I really focus on the practical elements of how you can do it. It's not reams of paperwork. It's not, we're trying to get away from people thinking it's too hard. How can we do things practically and simply? And it can be done. It can be done. Yes, you do have to change the way you do things and some things. And yes, you will need to spend some time on some paperwork, but it doesn't have to be overly hard. And once you get started on it, it just gets easier and easier, but you can't avoid it. You just can't.
Well, as we come towards the end of our conversation, Denise, which I've enjoyed immensely, I must say.
Yeah.
You've got a farmer for another minute or two. What are you telling them? What's the one thing you would tell them if they said, "Denise, give us a spot of advice right now"?
Okay. The 3 things are have an emergency information sheet. The second thing would be get your employees' emergency contact information. And the third thing would be ask your employees, do they have any health issues or pre-existing injuries that you need to know about so you can protect them in the course of your work?
That sounds to me like 3 pieces of proactive advice. It sounds to me like safety is something you should do proactively and not reactively. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought I picked that up in the last little while. Denise, that's all we have time for in this conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us. People will no doubt now want to read more about you and learn more about your business. Where can people find out that information?
Sure. I've got my own website, and I do have a resources section which has a lot of templates and things, links to use that will really help you get started. So I'll spell my website out because my surname can be quite confusing. So it's denisemclellan.com.au. It's DenisMcLellan, denisemclellan.com.au.
And for the last hour, people have had your name on the bottom of the screen, so they would have been able to write that down, wouldn't they? But that's a good idea. Denise, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to chatting to you again down the track.
Thanks, Neil. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's all we have time for in this episode of Farm Business Bites, presented by Partners in Ag and supported by WorkSafe Victoria. For more information or to contact Partners in Ag, please visit the website at www.partnersinag.org.au. Thanks for your company on Farm Business Bites today. My name's Neil Butler. Goodbye for now.